The secret to a perfect soufflé isn't the eggs or the oven temperature. It's the silence. If you agitate the air too much, the whole thing collapses into a pathetic, hollow mess. I've spent 40 years mastering that silence, standing over stainless steel counters until my veins mapped out the history of my hard work. I was the silent engine behind Vance and Vine, the most prestigious catering firm in the tri-state area. I fed presidents, CEOs, and royalty. But to my son Julian and his wife Beatrice, I wasn't a culinary titan. I was just the help who happened to share their DNA. I was the live-in nanny they didn't have to pay, the gourmet chef they didn't have to tip, and the grandmother they kept in the shadows until it was time to show off. They thought they were the ones rising in the world. They didn't realize that I was the one holding the tray, and I was about to let it drop. My name is Evelyn Vance. I am 65 years old, and my hands are a map of every burn, cut, and callus I earned to put my son through the best schools in the country. When my husband passed away young, I didn't have time for grief. I had a mortgage and a hungry boy. I built my business from a single convection oven in a cramped apartment into a multi-million-dollar empire. When I retired 3 years ago, I thought I was moving into Julian's sprawling estate to be a grandmother. I wanted to teach my granddaughter, Maya, how to knead bread. I wanted to tell her stories about the world. Instead, I became a ghost in a house of glass. Julian had married Beatrice, a woman whose ambition was as sharp and cold as a meat cleaver. She didn't want a mother-in-law, she wanted a lifestyle. Within months of moving in, they had moved me from the spacious guest suite to a small room above the garage, for my own privacy, Beatrice claimed. I became the one who prepped the school lunches at 5 a.m., the one who scrubbed the wine stains out of the white carpets after their networking mixers, and the one who was strictly forbidden from speaking to their high society guests. Evelyn, dear, Beatrice would say, her voice like honey mixed with vinegar. We have the Whitmore family coming for dinner tonight. It's a very sensitive business evening for Julian. It would be best if you stayed in the kitchen. We wouldn't want to confuse them with too many people at the table. I was the invisible staff. They would brag to their friends about the exquisite catering they had for their parties, never mentioning that the woman who spent 14 hours prepping the duck confit was sitting in the laundry room eating a ham sandwich alone. The dynamic shifted from neglect to outright cruelty during the preparations for the Solstice merger. Julian was a senior partner at a mid-level investment firm, and he was desperate to land a deal with Vanguard Holdings. If the merger went through, Julian would become a multimillionaire overnight. The CEO of Vanguard, a man named Silas Thorne, was known for being an old-school traditionalist. He didn't care about spreadsheets as much as he cared about character and legacy. Julian and Beatrice were frantic. He wants a home-cooked, 5-course meal. Julian paced the kitchen, his silk tie loosened. He hates corporate catering. He wants authenticity. Mom, you have to do the full Vance signature menu. The truffle risotto, the wagyu ribeye, the works. I looked at my son. His eyes were bloodshot, not with love or concern for me, but with greed. Julian, I've been having some pain in my wrists lately, I said softly, rubbing the joint where carpal tunnel had set in years ago. Perhaps we could hire a sous chef to help. Mom, don't be dramatic, Beatrice interrupted, not even looking up from her tablet. It's just dinner for 6. You used to do this for 300 people. Besides, we're already providing you with room and board. Think of this as your contribution to the family's future. If Julian gets this merger, we might even look into that senior living community you mentioned, the one with the garden. She said it like a threat. A retirement home was her way of saying she wanted me out of her sight as soon as my utility was exhausted. That evening, I was prepping the mirepoix when I heard them talking in the dining room. They didn't know the kitchen vents carried sound perfectly. Is your mother going to behave? I heard Silas Thorne's assistant asking. He had come early to check the vibe of the house. Oh, don't worry about the cook, Beatrice laughed. She's a sweet old thing, very traditional. She's been with the family for years. She doesn't speak much English. You know how it is with domestic staff. We just keep her happy with her knitting and her little kitchen projects. The knife in my hand slipped, nicking my finger. I didn't flinch. I watched the drop of blood hit the cutting board. Domestic staff. Doesn't speak English. They had spent 3 years telling their friends I was a distant relative or the help because they were ashamed of my working-class roots. They wanted the fruit of my labor, but they were disgusted by the tree it grew on. What Julian and Beatrice didn't know, what I had spent 3 years hiding in the name of humility, was that when I sold Vance and Vine, I didn't just put the money in a savings account. I had formed an anonymous venture capital group called the Hearthstone Fund. I had spent my retirement years quietly investing in young female chefs, sustainable farms, and a little company called Vanguard Holdings. In fact, I wasn't just an investor. Through a series of holding companies, I was the majority shareholder of the very firm Julian was trying to merge with. Silas Thorne didn't report to a board of directors, he reported to me. We had been friends for 20 years. I had catered his daughter's wedding and his father's funeral. He called me the general because of how I ran a kitchen. He knew I was living with Julian. He also knew I wanted to keep my business life separate from my family life. But he didn't know how I was being treated. He thought I was the queen mother of the household. I pulled out my phone with trembling, flour-dusted fingers and sent a single text to Silas. Silas, regarding the dinner tomorrow. Change of plans. I'll be sitting at the table. And I'll be the one serving the truth. The night of the dinner arrived. The house smelled of rosemary, garlic, and expensive perfume. Julian was wearing a $3,000 suit I had pressed for him that morning. Beatrice was draped in diamonds, fluttering around Silas Thorne like a moth to a flame. Our chef is quite shy, Beatrice told Silas as they sat down at the mahogany table. But I've instructed her to bring out the first course. It's a delicate lobster bisque. I stood in the kitchen, wearing my old, pristine white chef's coat, the one with Evelyn Vance, executive chef embroidered in gold on the chest. I hadn't worn it in 3 years. I straightened my posture, took a deep breath, and pushed through the swinging doors. The silence that hit the room was deafening. Julian's wine glass stopped halfway to his mouth. Beatrice's face turned a shade of grey that matched the stone flooring. Good evening, Silas, I said, my voice projecting with the authority of a woman who had commanded 100 kitchens. Silas Thorne stood up immediately, a massive grin breaking across his face. Evelyn. The general. I was wondering when you'd stop hiding in the back. You look magnificent. He walked over and, to Julian's horror, gave me a respectful kiss on both cheeks. You two know each other. Julian stammered, his voice cracking like a teenager's. Know her? Silas laughed, looking at Julian. Son, your mother is the reason I have a company to merge with. She's the primary backer of Vanguard. She's the sharpest mind in the industry. But I suppose you know that, being her son. The silence returned, but this time it wasn't the silence of a soufflé. It was the silence of a tomb. Actually, Silas, I said, pulling out a chair at the head of the table, the chair Beatrice had reserved for herself. There seems to be a slight misunderstanding. You see, according to Beatrice, I'm just the help who doesn't speak much English. And according to Julian, I'm a mysterious distant relative they keep in the garage for my own privacy. Silas's smile vanished. He looked at Julian, then at Beatrice, then back at me. The garage? Evelyn, you told me you were moving here to be the heart of the home. I thought I was, I said, signaling for the maid, a girl they had hired just for the night to assist me, to bring out the wine. But it turns out I was just an unpaid intern. I've spent the last 3 years scrubbing floors I paid for and cooking meals I was never invited to eat. In fact, Beatrice told the Whitmores that I was domestic staff who likes to knit. Beatrice tried to speak, her mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. Evelyn. Mother, it was a joke, a social misunderstanding. A misunderstanding is when you oversalt the soup, Beatrice, I said coldly. What you did was an insult to the woman who funded your entire lifestyle. Julian, did you tell Silas that the down payment for this house came from my domestic savings? Or that the car you're driving was a gift from my knitting projects? Julian was staring at his plate, the lobster bisque mocking him with its richness. Silas, I said, turning my focus to the CEO. As the majority shareholder of Vanguard, I've been reviewing the merger proposal from Julian's firm. I had some concerns about the culture of the leadership. I believe the term I used in my notes was a lack of integrity and a failure to respect foundational assets. Julian looked up, terror in his eyes. Mom, please. This is business. Don't do this. You're right, Julian. This is business, I replied. And in business, if a partner proves to be untrustworthy with the small things, like the dignity of their own mother, they cannot be trusted with the big things. Silas, I'm vetoing the merger. Effective immediately. The heir left the room. Julian's career didn't just stall. It imploded. Without the Vanguard merger, his firm would likely let him go. His reputation in the city would be toxic. No one wants to do business with the man who kept the legendary Evelyn Vance in a garage. And one more thing, I said, standing up. I've decided to sell this house. Since I'm the one who holds the deed through the family trust, and since you found my presence so confusing for your guests, I think it's best if we all find new living arrangements. I've already purchased a lovely penthouse downtown. There is no room in it for people who don't know how to say thank you. The aftermath was a whirlwind of frantic apologies and desperate begging. Julian came to my room, the small room above the garage, crying, telling me he was under so much pressure, that Beatrice had pushed him, that he didn't mean it. I looked at him, and for the first time in my life, I didn't feel the urge to fix it for him. Julian, I said, packing my final suitcase of quilts. I spent my life making sure you never went hungry. I worked until my bones ached so you could have every advantage. But I failed you in one way. I never taught you that the hands that feed you are sacred. You didn't lose this deal because of me. You lost it because you forgot who you were. Beatrice tried to play the victim, claiming I was ruining their lives over a few comments. I simply handed her a bill for 3 years of private chef and nanny services, calculated at my professional market rate. It came to nearly $400,000. Consider it a gift, I told her. I won't sue you for it. But I will be taking my furniture. All of it. I moved into my penthouse 2 weeks later. It has a kitchen that would make a Michelin star chef weep with joy. Maya, my granddaughter, comes to visit me every weekend. We knead bread together, and I tell her stories about her grandfather and the empire we built from nothing. Julian is working at a much smaller firm now, living in a modest apartment. Beatrice left him 6 months after the merger collapsed. Turns out, she was only interested in the Vanguard lifestyle, not the man behind it. Julian and I are speaking again, but it's different. He calls me every Sunday. He doesn't ask for money. He asks for recipes. He's finally learning how to cook for himself. Sometimes, people think that mothers are like slow cookers, always there, always warm, always taking whatever you throw into them. But they forget that every mother has a boiling point. I am Evelyn Vance. I am a mother, a CEO, and a master of the final course. And I've learned that the best way to enjoy a meal is with people who know that the most important ingredient is respect. If you're listening to this, and you're feeling invisible in your own life, if you're being treated like the help by the people you've given everything to, remember, you hold the ingredients. You hold the recipe. And you have the power to step out of the kitchen and take your seat at the head of the table. Don't let them tell you that you're just a ghost in your own home. You are the foundation. And if the foundation decides to move, the whole house has to learn how to stand on its own. If this story stirred something inside you, don't scroll away in silence. Tap like, it tells us these stories deserve to be told. Subscribe to Vengeful Goddess for unforgettable tales of betrayal, resilience, and justice, stories you won't hear anywhere else. Turn on the bell icon, so the next story reaches you the moment it drops. Your support keeps these voices alive. Because sometimes, revenge isn't loud, being heard is.